A Chadian rebel group advancing south from Libya reject a military transition led by the son of the late President Idriss Deby. The 68-year-old died on Tuesday after being injured while fighting rebels on the front line at the weekend. The group calls itself the Libyan-based Front for Change and Concord in Chad. The rebel group was formed by dissident army officers.
The Libyan-based Front for Change and Concord in Chad rejected the military's plan on Tuesday, saying that they would continue to press on with the offensive.
Mesdames et messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of Chad, here's the official statement of the High Command of the National Resistance Forces. In everything that concerns the life of our nation, we must not leave anything undecided. We therefore have a duty to present to you the reality as it is in our country at this moment. It is important that things are clear for all of us. Chad is not a monarchy. There can be no dynastic devolution of power in our country. The nation resistant forces from the Front for Change and Concord in Chad are right now on their way towards N'Djamena with confidence, but above all, with courage and determination.
pour nous tous.
Mohammed Idriss Deby was named interim president by a transitional council of military officers on Tuesday after his father was killed in battle with FACT. FACT claimed responsibility for the injuries that killed Deby on Monday. An ex-army officer who often joined soldiers on the battlefront, Deby was visiting troops who had held up the rebel advance in intense fighting over the weekend. The group, which is not linked to jihadists, said they were now in Kanem region, about 200 to 300 kilometers north of the capital of N'Djamena, and that their aim was to bring democracy to Chad after years of authoritarian rule by Deby. The group say they won't support Mohammed Deby's government, who is the son of the slain leader. Mohammed takes over as president and armed forces commander as the rebel forces threaten to march on the capital, further deepening the turmoil in a country vital to international efforts to combat militant insurgency in Africa. People in the streets of N'Djamena say they are concerned about the military takeover. They called for dialogue with the rebels and a return to civilian rule.
We must make sure that this military council does not take over power. And to all those fighting with weapons, it is time to lay down their weapons. We, the Chadians, are fed up. We do not need people who take power with weapons, but need to sit together and talk and set up strong institutions.
We, the population, are shouting because we need a solution. If the armed opposition does not agree with this president and this transition, we must find a way of resolving these problems soon. We absolutely need a civilian president who can govern for these 18 months and organize the election.
We do not want these soldiers still in power. We want a civilian transition limited to 1 year and 6 months. We need to see our new president. This is not a monarchy in which you transfer power from father to son. We just want to vote.
The political opposition also denounced the military's takeover of control, calling the move a coup d'etat and rejecting its plan for transition. The 37-year-old General Deby moved to consolidate his position on Wednesday, with the council issuing a new charter in place of the country's constitution, granting him the functions of president and also naming him as head of the armed forces. The council's vice president, Njimadum Tiriana, had said earlier that the army wanted to return power to a civilian government and hold free and democratic elections in 18 months. The young interim leader enjoys the support of France's Emmanuel Macron. The French president has confirmed that he will go to the funeral of the late Chadian president Idriss Deby. On the domestic front, the military is divided and the opposition bridling against years of repressive rule. Internationally, France and the United States will be hoping their counter-terrorism efforts are not pushed off course.
Aujourd'hui, une transition commence dans des conditions dont nous prenons acte.
Today, a transition is starting in conditions that we are monitoring. We hope that this will take place peacefully in a spirit of dialogue and consultations to attain a civil governance that is stable and for the military transition to be as short as possible. As the President has recently reminded, the fight against terrorism in the Sahel will not stop.
Barkhane continue le combat contre les groupes armés terroristes.
Deby had been in power since 1990 and had just been declared winner of the presidential election that would have given him a 6th term in office.
To unpack what legacy Chad's Idriss Deby leaves behind, we're now joined via Zoom by Dr. Paul Simon Handy, the Senior Advisor to the Institute for Security Studies Regional Offices in Dakar and Addis Ababa. Dr. Simon, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us and a warm welcome to the Globe.
Pleasure.
Now that President Idriss Deby is gone, what next for the country? What next? Because there's now fears of potential unrest in the country.
Yeah, Chad is definitely entering into uncertain waters. The future is quite uncertain for everyone, for the new ruling military council, for the population, for the opposition, but also for Chad's partner in the region and internationally. So it's quite uncertain times, and only the next days will actually give us more clues. But you're right, uncertainty is what describes could describe Chad now.
Now, President Idriss Deby ruled Chad with an iron fist, ruthlessly dispensing critics and potential rivals. For instance, Chad has not had a prime minister since a coup attempt in 2018. But the West, and in particular his allies, France in particular, continue to celebrate his legacy.
President Deby's governance has been essentially a military governance. It can actually be an interesting irony to see that the day he was declared winner of the presidential election is the day he was actually also being shot in the front, showing actually where the priority for his governance style lied, actually. So he never shied away from actually fighting. So yes, he's been a military. He thought President Deby definitely stabilized Chad. He took over power through a coup, ending a period of instability and conflict cycle that probably will go down as his biggest legacy. But on the other side, he probably neglected also the management of the economy and the uplifting of the Chadian society, particularly after Chad has been endowed with so much oil wealth whose exploitation started at the beginning of the year 2000, in the early 2000s. So yes, his legacy is quite diverse, but his human rights records was left a bit much to be desired.
Remember that a new constitution had been promulgated in December last year. And this constitution, that provision of a constitution perhaps created the position of vice president. But at the time he has been killed, the prime minister, the vice president position has still not been killed, or rather has still not been filled. What does this tell you about this? Is it perhaps a delaying tactic, a deliberate one, as it were?
Not really. I don't think. Look, I expect that if President Deby hadn't been killed 2 days ago, that in the next month we would have had a vice president. The reality is that today this constitution has been suspended by the current transitional military council. So they've put in place a new charter which replaces the constitution. So this has all the signs and the trappings of a coup, of a palace coup, and that will have to be treated as such by regional organizations and the relevant continental organization, the African Union.
Well, this concentration of power in the presidential clan meant that there was no apparent political successor to Mr. Deby. I do get a sense that perhaps the ascension to the highest office of his son was planned, or it is just a contingency measure.
It's difficult to tell. Clearly, President Deby's son has had a very, he rose through the military ranks in a very extremely fast way. He probably wouldn't have had such a brilliant military career if his father wasn't the president. So clearly, President Deby was probably seeing in him a potential, not necessarily successor, but high military commander of the country. Definitely, his death caught not just his entourage, but also the whole country by surprise. So in that sense, I don't think it was planned, but clearly by the general, the inner circle of Deby, by deciding that his son will succeed him, they probably went for the lowest common denominator, which will be more able to maintain the grip on power of Deby's family, Deby's clan, but of course also a certain unity of the army.
Sure, the appointment of his son, to take over the reins was met by surprise by most Chadians, if not all. But then it's a clear violation of the Constitution, because the Constitution provides that the Speaker needs to take over upon the President's death for 40 days until the next election.
It is in violation of Chad's constitution, but of course the military rulers today will tell you that the constitution has been suspended, which is another violation because they have no right to suspend that constitution. And the death of a president does not justify the suspension of a constitution. There are constitutional mechanisms that actually cater for such a situation in Chad. So in that sense, yes, it is an unconstitutional change of government, and the African Union Peace and Security Council will actually meet today in an emergency meeting to discuss that matter. So one of the possible outcomes will actually be the suspension of Chad from the African Union up until the constitutional order is restored.
Yeah, and speaking of the constitutional order, which is in ruins, as it were, because, the Constitution has been suspended and it will be replaced by a transitional charter to be decreed by Mohamed Deby. Are you at all concerned that this constitutional charter that will be decreed by his son will go in the favor of his regime?
The charter won't necessarily be the problem. The devil will be in the detail. I think the charter will generally be general, give a lot of power to the military council, but which is something that is expected when you have an emergency government like that, a transition government, particularly when it's managed by military actors. So in that sense, what will be important will be the roadmap of should this transition government be maintained, the roadmap and recognized by the international community, because that's where the crux of the matter is. Then the roadmap they will actually set out will give an idea of the type of type of military regime we'll have for the next 18 months. So in that sense, it's a bit early days now to say what will happen, but we'll have to wait until we know exactly what they want to do, when elections will be organized, if the opposition parties will be allowed to participate, or whether we'll just see a recycling of the ruling elite, and basically also the preparation of a victory for one of former President Deby closest ally.
And we know that the late Deby had so many sons, and some of whom served in his government in different capacities. And it's likely that there will be tension between Mohamed and some of his half-brothers. It does appear that a war is brewing within the Deby household before it'll spread to Chad, isn't it?
Yeah, there are definitely frictions within the family. There are frictions even within the extended clan. President Deby hails from a community called the Sahawa, and the Sahawa are have a strong grip on many Chadian institutions. So in that sense, yes, we know there are frictions. President Deby also had several wives and many children, but beyond that, the friction extends to other parts of the country, including the rebellion that is actually also threatening the stability of the country. These rebellion, part of the rebel leaders are also even from the community, the ethnic group President Deby is coming from.
Well, the opposition has rejected the Transitional Military Council, but the opposition, we know that it is divided, it's highly polarized, and will not succeed in mounting a significant challenge to the military junta. So what would happen next?
It's highly likely that the opposition will have to unite to confront these military junta. They're just getting out of a very contested electoral process where many of the opposition leaders didn't run for president, either by design or because they were actually coerced into it. So opposition was divided, but now the challenge is a new one, and we see an increasingly united opposition front against this military junta, and we'll have to wait to see how they react to the offers the new transitional council will bring to the table.
All right, Dr. Paul Simon Handy, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your analysis.
Thank you.
All right. That was Dr. Paul Simon Handy, the Senior Advisor to the ISS Regional Offices in Dakar, speaking to us live via Zoom.